Okay, hello. Recording again for the first time in about half a year, I'd say. I'm gonna head to the Capitalism area. Just, by the way, not the name that I would have given it necessarily, but it's sort of what it's been known as now. Um, won't be much to say about this. Kind of some filler platforming. Still like trying to do something different with every save. Even though, or like even if they're small things, I feel like each save kind of does something that no other save in the game does. And then I'm gonna end up here. In this area I will have a lot more to say about. So first thing that might be interesting to know here is that this area was added in the last 2 weeks of development. Like many other things in the game. And I find that kind of interesting because the particular gimmick that's used here, which is the shoot refresher, has become like one of the most iconic parts of the game. But it could have very well just not have been in the game at release. But I probably mentioned this about some earlier area too, but the reason I added this area was to have like a longer stretch, or like a longer passage to reach this area. So I didn't like the idea of having this area being so close by the hub. And it's really just about atmosphere. I think it adds a lot when an area feels remote and isolated, as opposed to being like closely accessible. And that's like really noticeable in a lot of games to me. It's like when you start a game up and they immediately throw you into like some really grand or like extreme environment, it just doesn't really hit. It doesn't give you the good feels. Whereas if you really have to work for it, and if like it feels like almost like a hidden, tucked away place in the game, I feel like it just feels a lot cooler. So that's sort of what I was going for by adding this area. And I know, so like when I knew I wanted an area here, I was trying to think of what gimmick I would use. And I landed on this gimmick, which I had already invented but not really utilized much. But I want to show you, so I prepared like a little slide reel of images to show how some of the gimmicks come about. And there's gonna be a bit of a pattern to how I come up with stuff. So I'm gonna switch to a display capture. Alright, so this is a screen from Bashi World 10. And of course in my game I made a stage where I recreated part of stage 10 from Bashi World 10. So it starts with this room, and this was not really possible for me to recreate in a one-to-one fashion because the vines in Bashi restore your double jump. You can always double jump over vines. And of course, like that's maybe something that I could have added with someone's help. But with my sort of limited coding ability, like I wasn't about to figure that one out. So what I did instead was that I added this little orb here in the middle. I hope you can see my cursor. And that's the same as the shoot refresher. So you shoot it and it gives you your jump back. And that's how that gimmick came about. So I had a sort of a problem. I couldn't, this section wasn't doable without an extra jump. then I thought of solutions, and like of course I can add like a jump refresher, or I can add a platform, which I've done like a million times. You know, adding platforms to give you your jump back, or gravity flippers or whatever. Um, but there's like there was sort of like a natural spot to put something here, this little gap in the middle, and I just sort of randomly thought of a jump refresher that you shoot instead of touch. So that's how that gimmick came about. That is unrelated. And this I mentioned when I was doing this stage. So the initial idea for this room was to have really fast bouncy blocks where you go up and down and up and down. But when I tried to put that into practice, it was clear that like you're going way too fast to make any playable segment with that. So then I thought, oh, I can maybe just like change the speed value, and that's how this gimmick came about. Again, same principle. Like I had a problem, and I just found a solution. It's like I'm not going out of my way. I'm not like sitting down and thinking like, oh, what gimmick should I try to come up with? Like these gimmicks just sort of came up organically, and then when I made it, I realized, oh, I can make a lot more stuff with this. So this screen, the screen itself, like the concept of going into the middle and like having these spinning cherries, was something that I came up with just randomly when I was out on a walk. But the initial concept had, instead of water apples, it had the normal like square water tiles. But when I put that into practice, it just looked really weird, and they like cut into the apples. And it just made it a really cluttery. And then like I thought of various solutions to this, and like eventually I just came up with the water apple, which just looks really clean and nice. Like even though the water apples it's such a basic gimmick. Like it's just a water tile that has a change sprite. But it's also like it's just so good, and a lot of other games have used it since. Like even if it in its simplicity. Right, so here the teleported thing in the middle. So I had like a specific jump sequence in mind here with the gravity flippers, but then I wanted the screen exit to be on the left, and I didn't want the player to have to take like a big detour here. And so like the solution that I ended up going with was just to have like a warp like this. Although I've used warps like this before, but I thought of like this visual representation with the kid. And that's like another gimmick that has gotten a lot of mileage. Like I've gotten mileage out of it, but other people have as well. It's like a pretty commonly used gimmick nowadays. Right, so here's a screen from Crimson Needle 1. So like what gimmick could have possibly spawned out of this? Well, when I was making Haystack 2, and I was recreating this screen, like buffing it. Who's calling me? Fuck off. I thought, it's like my concept for this screen was gonna be that you do the whole thing backwards. So you start at the warp, and then like the save here in the middle would be the end warp. But you know, there's an immediate problem. It's a tiny problem, but like if you spawn here, you can't get past this little platform here, so you're stuck. So then my solution was to tilt the platform, flip it 90 degrees, and thus the sideways platform was born. I think this is like a super cool example of just like sort of unorthodox problem solving, because like yeah, I could have made the player just spawn like here in the bottom left, or I could have like pushed the platform into the wall, although that looks weird because these blocks are transparent. Or like there's like a million little solutions. So like for whatever reason, and look like I'm not saying like this is sort of like the logical conclusion of how you fix any of these problems, but it's this approach that I've talked about where you have a problem and you're not going to the default way of solving the problem. You're really like looking to do something else, and then you can see like once I had the sideways platform, like oh, like I immediately started using it because I realized like oh, I have a pretty cool gimmick here at my hand. So yeah, just some examples of like how I come up with gimmicks. You know, it's not about sitting down and thinking. They just sort of happen when I try to solve problems. Let's go back to this. Okay. So while I'm here, I also wanted to like briefly talk a little bit about gimmicks in fan games. And initially, I was thinking like, oh, I'm gonna do like a big thing about gimmicks, because at the time, I guess at the time when I finished recording my last video, like the whole like pure versus gimmick needle debate was still sort of alive. But I think today, like that has sort of died down, and people have come to terms with that gimmick needle is just ordinary needle, and like you just have to get accustomed to the gimmicks themselves, and it's like the same thing. That's just how I look at it. It's like these particular gimmicks, at least, they don't change the gameplay like any sort of drastic way. They just extend the possibilities of what you can design, and they make exploring the game more interesting because you're sort of engaging with something where you have to, you know, use your brain and like, try to understand something. And like I respect that some people might not want that. So like I'm not like I'm not shitting on people who don't like gimmick needle. I think it's fair to just want the same thing and like do jumps that you're comfortable with, that you can look at a jump and like immediately know and feel how to approach it. But I think that the initial backlash against gimmick needle was just really stupid and ridiculous. And I also think that what people might have like objected to or not liked was not so much the gimmicks, but the way the gimmicks have been implemented. And this is something that I'm like also starting to get a little tired of myself. Is that gimmick needle has sort of become synonymous with having saves that are like long sequences of jumps where you don't land and you're like saving your double jumps and you're floating around, right? Like everyone knows that sort of style. And yeah, it just seems like that's what, when you say gimmick needle, that's what you're referring to. You're not referring to games that have gimmicks in them. Because obviously, like, people are not calling games that have vines or platforms or gravity flippers gimmick needle because they have those gimmicks. Even though they're like clearly, you know, as much of a gimmick as these shoot refreshers are. This is also like a thing that I always keep coming back to mentioning, but when I first started getting into fan games, I heard like a lot of bad mouthing vines. It seemed to be like the general consensus that vines are not fun. And then you had like a few, like a small minority of people who enjoyed vines. And as far as I can see, like that small minority, those were the people that had become accustomed to vines and like learned to use them gotten kind of good at them, probably by playing Rukido games, right? Um, and it's like the same thing here. Like once people started getting accustomed to these gimmicks and like they started getting good at using them, like they stopped complaining about gimmick because it's just the same thing as a vine or a platform or whatever. Like it's just an extension of um, the normal uh, moveset or whatever. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say about that. Yeah, made this stage near the end of development, which means that to my tastes, it's better designed. Like the platforming itself is better designed than most of the game, because I think I was just a better level designer by the end. Like I feel like a lot of, I mean, yeah, the jumps here are pretty um, involved, pretty convoluted and interesting, and yeah, the pathing here is also pretty cool. This is also like a pretty telling thing that I made one screen with these, like the blue jump refreshers, and then like already like on the next screen I was kind of tired of designing with the gimmick, and I introduced a new one with the alternating one. So you shoot the green one and it turns the orange one green, or it activates it. But yeah, it's just kind of typical. And then on the next screen, like I was already bored with just designing regular platforming with it, so I changed it up to a more puzzly style of design. But yeah, I really like this area, and I think thematically it really leads well into the area below. So it has this sort of industrial, like machine room vibe to it, and then that's like dialed up in the next area where especially with the song being really like harsh and yeah, machine like. So yeah, let's head there. The life under capitalism stage. Yeah, I mean most people know, but like this song was recorded with a washing machine, like using only samples from a washing machine, as was every song off of the album it's from. And I did pick it because that's like a funny reference to the dishwasher song in in CM2, like the infamous dishwasher song. But yeah, I mean this song also like it kind of slaps, and it's good for me to use songs every once in a while that are like a bit more like a lot more in this case upbeat and like energetic, because I do have a bias towards very like soft melancholy ambient esque just instrumental music. It's what I prefer when I do needle, but I think it's good to mix it up, and it definitely like fits the vibe of this stage way better. Um, but yeah, here's another funny example of what I just mentioned in the last little stage. Like I made this first room, these like very simple bouncy blocks here. I had like a little more complicated, I guess, with the path. And then on the next room, I just fucking dial it up to 11, like a super extreme version of the same thing. Yeah, I don't know if people know this, but like the way this is designed is not. It's probably not how most people would go about making something like this. So rather than having individual blocks here that follow a path that goes like right left, like pretty simple path, this whole block thing is a single object with a single sprite. So like all of this is one sprite, and the object is set to bounce on collision with blocks. So it's just like one big blob that's bouncing left and right, and like it's the same in this room. Like these blocks are one sprite, and it's the same in the entire stage. So that's just like a very inefficient way of making this. And yeah, it's just because I didn't think of using paths. There's no like reason of purity or whatever. I'm just kind of, you know, dumb sometimes. But yeah, dude, this room. Oof, do I love this room? I think this room is super cool, especially the first save. The second save was kind of like, I was sort of limited by what I had put on the first save. Like the first save takes up so much space. But yeah, I think that this room is super cool. Super cool concept. Well executed for the first save. Like it forces some really cool movements. Yeah, and it's like not overly hard either, except for this jump, which is a mistake. Yeah. Fuck, there was something else I wanted to also mention here. Oh yeah, so like because of the inefficient way that I designed this, that making this stage was like a really arduous process. And when I got to this room, like I finished making the room above, it just like killed the development of the game. I think it took like a good 2 months before I could like bring myself to go back to completing this stage. It's just so daunting to like not only like design these, like that's not so bad, like designing the block sprites themselves, but like you also have to come up with design for it, and like if a particular jump doesn't work, then you have to like change the sprites, and it's super annoying to like try to do anything experimental with this, and that's gonna really show in the design, because I think this room is still cool. Like this save in particular, it's cool. The second save is like it's alright. It has some pretty cool jumps. And this is like the last save where I really tried. And this is where I'm just like I'm tapped out. Like I can't work on this stage anymore. It's too tedious, and I'm just out of ideas, and I can't like, bring myself to come up with new ones. This is just like repeating patterns, and there's like more repeating patterns. Some like this part is cool, but the other ones are like very basic. Yeah, and because of that, this stage is also pretty short. One of the shortest stages. But I think like even though I don't think the design in like the second half of the stage is the greatest, I do think that the stage is really cool, just because of the atmosphere here. And I'm really glad that I got that transition stage before it. I do think that it just adds so much. It makes this place feel so much more remote and isolated and just like claustrophobic. Yeah. Here, first secret that I made. And I think that sort of explains why it's so simple, because I didn't really have a plan for my secrets at this point. And I just made this room, like, not knowing it was gonna be a secret, but then I didn't know where to put it in the game, and I decided, oh, it should probably be a secret then. And then on like later secrets I made, I started putting increasingly more effort into making the secrets feel really special, because I don't think excuse me, just a really dry throat. But yeah, I don't think this room is anything all that special. I don't dislike it, but yeah, it's just basic. Plop. And yeah, that I think should do it for this stage. Right, so is this glitched? Like, this looks so that didn't look right. Yeah, this is a map of floor 31 and where the secrets are, but I don't think anyone really caught that initially. I mean, now people know, I think. Yeah, that will do it for this video. I'll see you.